Hi, thank you for finding time to come to this talk. I'm Ava Scott. I'm a PhD student at University College London, and I'm going to be talking to you about user perceptions of machine consciousness. When it comes to the prospect of machine consciousness, I expect a lot of you will have healthy amounts of both skepticism and speculation. A quick disclaimer, this presentation does not attempt to answer whether machine consciousness could exist. The nature of consciousness has been debated by philosophers and spiritual leaders for millennia. While consciousness was separated from material matter by Descartes in the 17th century, more recently neuroscientists have tried to bring consciousness back into the empirical material realm by using brain imaging to measure its neural correlates. However, as machines are increasingly able to emulate lifelike and even human-like behaviour, technologies such as Alexa, Roomba, and ChatGPT have been mentioned in the discussion of consciousness, encouraging computer science to enter the debate. However, interestingly, human-computer interaction has had little to say on machine consciousness so far. In this paper, we argue that people's perceptions of machine consciousness is more important to HCI than the actual existence of machine consciousness. We know that people build mental models of computer outputs that they don't understand. It is HCI's role to understand and work with these conceptualisations. While there has been extensive work on perceptions of anthropomorphism in robots and perceived agency in digital objects, there has not yet been an explicit account of perceptions of consciousness in machines. So we set out to fill this gap. To kickstart this inquiry, we surveyed 100 people working as participants on MTurk. The regional distribution covered the US, the UK, Europe, and Australia. We required all of our participants to be fluent in English. MTurk is completely anonymous, allowing participants to be as honest as possible about their perceptions of consciousness in machines. However, MTurk participants may share some characteristics in their knowledge of machines and computers, so future work should take these questions outside of an online survey. We had two main research questions. The first is whether people actually perceive machine consciousness in contemporary technologies, and if so, to what degree. After this, we will measure the narratives, concerns, and speculations, but first we need to actually check if people do perceive machine consciousness. The features of particular systems are likely to influence the perceptions of consciousness in them, so it was important to include a variety of technologies as research probes. We chose 3 technologies that have all been discussed previously in the consciousness literature and the HCI literature: Alexa, a vacuum robot, and GPT. We introduced participants to these technologies using videos where they display varying levels of interactivity, anthropomorphism, language skills, and movement. For example, while the robot vacuum cleaner can move independently, the Alexa speaker and GPT-3 can use language and converse. While GPT-3 interacts via a text interface, Alexa uses a voice interface. This diversity of features allows us to explore whether consciousness is perceptible across systems with a wide range of functionalities and traits. The systems also vary in the level of public familiarity. However, we measured this and we found that it had no significant effect on the perception of consciousness. Inspired by the phrasing in Thomas Nagel's famous paper, we asked participants if they thought it felt like something to be that technology. This phrasing gets close to a colloquial understanding of phenomenal experience. This is the distribution of our results. These are interesting because we see most of our answers surrounding the extremes. While the majority of people felt that the technology was definitely not conscious, the second most common answer was it definitely was conscious. We then wanted to see how participants would quantify the concept of consciousness. So we asked them to rate the technology on a scale. If the participant thought the technology was definitely not conscious, they would rate it as a 0 or a 1 on the scale. If they thought the technology was definitely conscious, they would rate it as a 10 on the scale. Surprisingly, we found that the majority of people perceive some degree of consciousness in each of these systems. This is not what we expected. However, we did also find that many people do not perceive any consciousness at all. So, to answer our first research question, some people do perceive consciousness in machines, but some don't. It seems that both camps of speculation and denial will have a significant number of proponents. A challenge for HCI researchers will be to put aside their own perspectives and engage with the distribution of all perspectives. However, this meta-perspective might make us unpopular with both sides, who are likely to hold their beliefs with moral conviction. By investigating this objectively, one side could think that we are legitimizing the beliefs of the alternative side. To understand the implications of this approach, we will need to collaborate with philosophers and ethicists to better understand the moral and ethical parameters of these alternative beliefs. Part of this inquiry will be understanding how either side informs and justifies their opposing positions. So we set out to do this. Our second research question wanted to explore the narratives, concerns, and speculations that people currently associate with machine consciousness. We used sentence completion tasks, which ask participants to complete a given phrase. It's a bit like prompt engineering. Sentence completion tasks facilitate more flexible responses than questions with multiple choice answers, but also guide the respondent towards a more appropriate concept than a completely open-ended question. The 3 prompts above explored the various ways in which the word conscious or consciousness could be used. What is one's own consciousness like? What could the word conscious mean by itself? We can see that, before machines even enter the picture, their answers are complex and varied. 56 participants mentioned awareness, and 12 others mentioned reactivity. 14 participants mentioned emotions, while several others mentioned morality, principles, and taking responsibility. We also asked our participants to directly compare human consciousness with machine consciousness. Some rejected the question, saying it was impossible, unbelievable, or the product of deception. Other participants entertained the questions, some saying that machine consciousness could be more advanced or useful, or some would saying that it would be legitimately similar to human consciousness. 9 participants thought that machine consciousness would be lesser than humans in some way, and many thought that it would be controlled by humans or by the computing chip that it was embedded in. Finally, we then asked them to consider what their reactions would be to an example technology if it hypothetically appeared conscious. Here we got the widest range of answers, exploring the implications for the technology's performance, as well as for social interactions and more existential concerns. We also had people who would still deny the question, even when we asked them to be hypothetical. Using these quantitative findings and our qualitative speculations, we extracted dynamic tensions that could characterize the contradictions and conflations in people's understanding of consciousness. An example of one of these dynamic tensions is the dependence and independence of machines on humans. Many of our respondents associated consciousness with the ability to think and make decisions for oneself, or take responsibility for one's actions. However, machines are often perceived as dependent on humans or coding, and therefore submissive to their desires. This leads to an interesting tension. If machines appear to follow the instructions of a developer or a human, is this a reason to deny its consciousness? Or instead, to perceive it as a consciousness being restrained or held back by a developer? There is also an interesting interaction with the abstract statistical networks underlying much artificial intelligence. These neural networks may have been developed by a human, but the output is generated through impenetrable statistical associations that lack explainability to humans. These outputs could be perceived as emerging from an artificial intelligence which is independent of human instruction. Whether you are a skeptic or a speculator, the perception of machine consciousness raises some urgent research challenges for HCI. One major research challenge is understanding if and how a concept of machine consciousness manifests around the world. Existing challenges in HCI will be reinvigorated by a notion of machine consciousness. How does the perception of machine consciousness influence negotiations of status and hierarchy between machines and humans? Will it add another layer of legitimacy or complexity to the existing emotional relationships between users and their computers? Finally, interaction designers and scholars hold a lot of responsibility over the perception of consciousness in a machine interface. Already, the developers of GPT-4 and other chatbots have been accused of denying or lobotomizing their machines by restricting the machine's ability to react in particular ways. There is something of a catch-22 here. As designers, we have to anticipate the implications of machines being perceived as conscious, but we may also face the blame when they are not perceived as such. We must build an authority in what causes people to perceive machines as conscious, and the effects this will have on interaction. By building this voice, we can engage with other experts in an emerging discourse on machine consciousness. Together, we should try and put aside our own perceptions and work to realise the importance of HCI in an era of machine consciousness, whether that is real, perceived, or denied. Thank you for listening.